Your reaction to the Mulvaney briefing yesterday, first of all, the way he put the president right in the middle of this with a quid pro quo until he took it back.
Good afternoon, Andrea. Yesterday, the president's acting chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, co-signed the confession to extortion that President Trump has already made. And, people tend to want to look more into this. Is this a Jedi trick that they're doing? Or are they, do they have some legal strategy here? Sometimes people just tell the truth. And I think this more reflects that they think they can get away with it, and there's nothing wrong with it, more than any other overriding strategy.
We're hearing from Jerry Nadler that they want to look into the emoluments clause. When is enough too much? Should you be focusing on the big challenge of getting the Ukraine story right, at least as far as articles of impeachment are concerned, potentially?
That has to be the focus because it implicates national security, $390 million of taxpayer dollars, and also an election. Now, as it relates to this Doral booking for the G7 summit, Andrea, I would say this is something that Russia would do, except when I checked the last time Putin hosted the G8 summit in 2006, they actually hosted it at a state-owned palace. So this is something that's more corrupt than what the Russians would actually do. We should, of course, look into that. We shouldn't authorize any money from Congress that would pay for that. But I think the focus right now has to be this impeachment inquiry.
What is your timeline?
To get it right, to give the president a fair process, and to move expeditiously. When you have a confession from the president, when you have the chief of staff also acknowledging what happened, and then witnesses that we've already heard from corroborating that, you don't have to have a, years-long investigation. But again, he still is entitled, just as anyone who confesses to a crime, to a fair process.
And it doesn't have to be a crime, of course, to be an impeachable offense. So you're not prosecutors here necessarily. But the other question is, what about going to court and trying to get some of these other witnesses? Wouldn't that stretch it out well into the election year?
Yeah. So we tried that with the Mueller investigation, and you saw these lawless assertions of executive privilege. So now in this investigation, the way we see it is, if you want to come forward as a White House witness, as a State Department witness, it could only, if you want to come forward and help the president, to exonerate the president, and you have evidence to present, you should do that. But if you're not going to do that, we will conclude that it's a consciousness of guilt. We'll put it in a bucket of acting guilty, and it will be considered as an article of impeachment for obstruction of Congress. But we're not going to screw around with these lawless assertions of executive privilege any longer.
What about Rudy Giuliani? Do you want to hear from him yourself?
I'll let the chairman speak to that. What I think is important, though, Andrea, is that any time a witness talks about Rudy Giuliani, or any time that the president talks about Rudy Giuliani in these call transcripts, we have to make sure that people know Rudy Giuliani is Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is Rudy Giuliani. Any action that Rudy Giuliani took on behalf of Donald Trump as his personal lawyer was only for Donald Trump and at Donald Trump's direction. That's what lawyers do. They don't take actions to benefit their clients that are not authorized. And, that will be made more clear as this becomes more public.